Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the first in our series of online events, which will lead up to our face-to-face conference, Decent Work and Democracy, which is now scheduled for May the 20th and 21st next year, 2022, at Wortley Hall. And the booking link, if you're interested in that, is in the chat. Union Co-ops UK is the lead body for union co-ops here in the UK, and we are a relatively new organisation of trade unionists and cooperators, proud to work with our colleagues in other countries. Unions and co-ops, of course, go back a long way. Both come from the same radical roots, and many of the activists that created them were the same, including, of course, Robert Owen, who formed the Grand National Consolidated Trade Union in 1834 and actively supported the Tolpuddle Martyrs and the Chartists, fighting for rights and representation for working people. We as an organisation run on a shoestring, and we're very grateful to those of you who've chosen to give us a donation today, as well as our sponsors, the Bakers Union, BFAWU, the Musicians Union, and Cooperative Ways Forward, who are sponsoring the bursary scheme for our conference at Wortley Hall. Now, the union co-op movement is working to bring co-ops and unions together in a more formal way, working in partnership to create decent work with democracy in the workplace, no outside owners, and really importantly, union terms and conditions. If you want to keep up with us online, do please follow our website. I'll put the address in the chat. Now, we've a great panel lined up for you today, all from the States. Michael Peck from One Worker, One Vote, Ra Criscicello from SEIU-UHW, that's the Service Employees International Union's United Healthcare Workers Division. Kristen Barker and Ellen Vera, who are both from Co-op Cincy, which is of course in Cincinnati, and Kevin O'Brien from Works Printing, which specializes in custom printed garments. Protocols for the day: the session is being recorded and will end up on the internet, so do please bear that in mind. As audience members, your faces won't be seen, but your question and your name that's associated with it will be seen. If you want to ask a question of the panel or an individual panelist, please use the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please do that rather than using the chat, because if you use the chat, it's possible that your questions may simply get lost amongst all of the chat. The chat function is open, so you can send a message to everyone or to an individual as you choose. Format for the day is we've got 5 panelists speaking for around about 3/4 of an hour in total. Then we'll take questions from the audience, so get your questions in before then, and that will be for about half an hour. And then our panelists will have a chance to sum up. Scylla Ross will be our convener for the day. Her job is to keep the speakers in line, and Anita Mangan will be keeping an eye on your questions. So now I'll hand over to the first of our speakers, Michael Peck from One Worker, One Vote.
Alex, thank you so much. On behalf of all of us affiliated with the One Worker, One Vote movement, we thank the team of Union Co-ops UK and the UK Cooperative College for being so gracious and including us in so many seminal events and their accomplishments, such as in February 2019, the UK Cooperative College Summit in Manchester, July 2020, the Manifesto for Decent Work, May 2021, the great book edited by our colleague, our dear colleague, Julian Manley and PB Wyman, the Preston Model and Community Wealth Building, Creating a Socio-Economic Democracy for the Future, and today's Decent Work for a Better World. This is what transatlantic union co-op solidarity looks like, and it's inspired by the Mondragon cooperative ecosystem example. We are learning from each other, and on this panel are USA movement leaders that I learn from every single week that goes by. Ray Criscicello from SEIU-UHW, Kristen Barker and Ellen Vera from Co-op Cincy, and also co-founders of One Worker, One Vote. Ray is a One Worker, One Vote advisory board member, and the almighty Kevin O'Brien from Works Printing. So thank you to everyone for showing up at this hour. It's a great way to begin the day, and Ray will start us off.
Thanks, Michael, and I'm really happy and excited to be here with you all. I'm Ray Crisatello. I'm the Deputy Director of Research at SEIU United Healthcare Workers West. So we're a labor union in California, statewide, of about 100,000 allied healthcare workers. So our members are workers in mostly hospitals, some clinics, who have jobs like medical assisting, vocational nurses, janitors, people who work in food service, and a lot of tech classifications like respiratory techs and ultrasound techs. And so I wanted to share a bit about our experience with developing unionized healthcare staffing worker co-ops, a sort of pilot one classification, LVNs, licensed vocational nurses, is what we call them here. Sometimes they're called licensed practical nurses. And then a bigger one that we helped develop more recently that has it's multi-classification for healthcare workers to own their own labor and contract with hospitals or clinics the way a staffing agency would, but in a worker-owned unionized way instead. So just I guess a little bit of background about how or why we arrived at being a local of SEIU that's really invested in worker ownership, and there are others too, of course. But for us, I think it was probably 5 or 6 years ago, we were really struggling with what members were coming to us with in our union around the changing scope of practice of their particular jobs, jobs feeling like less meaningful, a lot of jobs being pushed outside of the four walls of the hospital, just like every other industry, the sort of infiltration of casual and gig work kind of coming in was happening even in these sorts of jobs. Constant attempts at hospital employers trying to contract work out, which is very hard to fight. Lack of control over work. So things that are common in a lot of industries. So we set about looking for a large scale systemic way to force proper classification of contract workers and also create a more asset rich and benefit rich environment for healthcare workers, both of course in our union, but also non-incumbent workers too. So we looked at everything we could. We looked at hiring halls and registries and what other charitable trusts and all kinds of interesting, more entrepreneurial things that other unions and grassroots organizations were doing, and became pretty convinced that helping our members develop worker-owned entities, worker cooperatives, would be a really deeply meaningful thing to try to fight that sort of tide that I was describing. So, so the first of our 2 attempts so far was the licensed vocational nurse cooperative. There were 6 LVNs in our union. They were all workers who were already in bargaining units in our union that wanted to be on the board and wanted to do this. So we, as the local, with we basically lent time, research, legal expertise, things like that to help them sort of set it up. But of course, they became an employer and were a real entity in the world, and the union stepped back. They also unionized with the union. So the relationship became much more clear. But in the beginning, we helped kind of work through some of the initial development of the co-op with them, which was a pretty wonderful and amazing experience. And yeah, I'd say just from the very beginning, the kind of natural alignment of the co-op with the union, both technically and kind of operationally, but also in a much deeper kind of values sort of way, was apparent in terms of what it was like to bargain the CBA, and then what it was like to have folks actually go out to do work, and the things that come up when that happens in healthcare, safety issues, things like that. So by any sort of standard I could think of, it was really successful. But a meaningful one at the union was that our leadership got very bought in. They saw how powerful this was, that LVNs were really like literally owning their job. They were making more money. Nobody else, the staffing company, wasn't skimming money off the top. They were able to do these visits in a way that felt really good to them because they helped design what that would look like. And so then, yeah, I'll fast forward a little bit to 4 months ago. A staffing cooperative that's multi-classification. So far it has MAs, LVNs, respiratory techs, a lot of classifications that are sadly very relevant during COVID because they're in very high demand. Respiratory tech would be the top one. Just launched after about 2 years of us helping them develop it. It's called Allied Up. And the first set of worker owners actually just bought their shares almost 2 weeks ago. They hit their bylaws requirement for a number of hours worked, which is 350 hours. So far the way that that's gone is mind-blowingly amazing because a couple of big hospital systems in California have signed contracts with them, with Allied Up, for labor. To me, notably ones that are typically extremely anti-union, and they understand the union relationship, but I guess there might be some amount of desperation for very well-trained healthcare workers right now, but also the sort of values and quality and the link to a training program that means that people are really well cared for. And of course, the worker ownership piece being key, has spoken to hospital systems in a way that honestly surprises me, even though I'm very positive in general about this. So there's some good news on that, and I do hope that it really scales. I mean, it's about 40 people right now, but in terms of workers, but we're hopeful that it's going to scale pretty quickly. So I don't want to take up more than my time, but that's been our experience from a healthcare workers union. Really appreciate you inviting me.
Okay, I think Kristen, you're next.
Wow, I am very inspired, Ray. That is such an awesome note to start with. Very excited, and I'm gonna try to share my screen. Let's see, it looks good. Looks like it's gonna work. Hold on one moment. Okay, so at Co-op Cincy, our goal is about creating an economy that works for all, especially for those who have been historically excluded. That's what we think about. So what we are is we are a union co-op incubator. So we're a nonprofit that is working to create an integrated network of worker-owned unionized co-ops. And we came to life in 2009 when Mondragon International made that historic agreement with the United Steelworkers. And we're proud that we were the first group in the US to bring that to life. And what got us so excited at that time was this idea, you know, what has happened in Mondragon. I mean, to have a true proven model that has moved the dial on poverty, that has moved the dial on inequality, that's what we really want to see. And we think, like, what has allowed them to do that? And so in our minds, some of the keys to Mondragon's success are that integrated, interconnected network for resilience, you know, not just one co-op being buffeted around, but being part of an integrated network and the flexibility that comes from that sort of solidarity mechanisms and all that mutual support. We think their education, their focus on education and their principles are key, in addition to the reinforcing structures. I'll talk about that in a second, that allow their co-ops to scale with values. Again, also they've got incredible capacity for innovation as everyone is so empowered to sense and respond to challenges and opportunities. So when I talk about that reinforcing structure, I just sort of talk about what a union co-op is structured like. So here in the US anyway, most of our co-ops have, worker owners that elect a board of directors. The board of directors may select management that works differently in different co-ops. But what Mondragon has and what we feel is so powerful is they have what they call a social council. What we in the US call the union committee. So this third body, so the board thinking long-term about the vision and direction, the management thinking about the day-to-day implementation of that vision, and then this union committee, this reinforcing structure or social council in Mondragon that allows the group to be having defined places for input, having that worker hat on, making sure that there, as a co-op scales, that there continue to be communication, defined communication, that there's a place to resolve conflicts. We think that just really strengthens and so forth and allows co-ops to be all they can be. So just briefly, and I'm not going to read all this, that would be a lot, but as I was just talking, like why a union co-op? To help co-ops scale with their values intact. Also, we think collective bargaining leads to clear expectations around human resources. Clarity often really helps a co-op culture. Unions help balance out the democratic work environment. So there can be, like Ray was just talking about, some of their people just got to that exciting moment where they became worker owners after 350 hours in that case. So there's always moments where people aren't yet worker owners, right? So it's really wonderful to have a union again as that reinforcing structure, or when there's different minority viewpoints, it's just such a lovely reinforcing structure. Access to improved and affordable benefits here in the US. I think you've got some better things going over there. Having a union connects the co-op to a platform for acting in solidarity with other workers. Again, so we think that's really important, that we always do better when we all do better. And also a co-op can only really, it can do a little like Ray was talking about. There's opportunities when you remove a middleman to increase wages, but there really are limits in a market, right? Like home care, we have a home care co-op. It's really dependent on the reimbursement rates. It really needs, we want to be connected to union and union power and workers in a whole industry to help do the structural changes that can allow us all to thrive. So those are some of the reasons we find this so valuable. All right. So at Co-op Cincy, we are creating that network. And this is a little picture over there of at a moment in time. It keeps shifting. There's about 14 co-ops now. And then I'll tell you about our services. So again, that's what we want to see, an economy that works for all. And to get there, we see 4 pathways. So one is that we support the launch of new co-op businesses. I'm going to talk more about that in a moment. 2, we assist existing businesses to transition to worker ownership. And Ellen is going to do a deep dive on that. So that's good news for me. 3, we provide ongoing support to our existing co-op network. And 4, we strengthen our statewide and national co-op networks, as well as participate in co-op policy efforts. So this is an example of one of our co-op U's. This is how we create new co-ops. We have a 14-week program, and we've incorporated lean business principles in addition to some of the wonderful things we've learned from Mondragon's co-op incubator. And it's a very iterative process. This one was with a group of Bhutanese refugees. We also have a very specialized one called Power in Numbers, which begins again next week. This is a focus on Black-led co-ops. The one we did in the spring has led to 5 new co-ops. So we work with, again, many different groups there'll be a national construction co-op U that begins in January. In order to support all these educational efforts, we've just released a new edition of this worker owner workbook. I'll talk more about that in a moment, along with a Spanish translation. And right now, there's a Co-op U manual and Co-op U facilitator guide underway that will be translated early next year. Ellen, again, is going to talk about this really critical strategy. So I'm skipping all those beautiful slides to go to our strategy 3, which is supporting our existing co-ops. So again, because we want to create an economy that works for all, we want to work with people that haven't had a lot of access to formal training. So what we do is give really intense wraparound services to our co-ops. We meet with them every week or every other week through team meetings, again, to be, a worker owner that's really informed and able to participate meaningfully. People need to feel really comfortable with financials. So we use things like the great game of business. And I have 1 more minute and we're almost there. So I'm just going to show you some pictures of our co-op. So we have team meetings, we support the management team, we connect them to a loan fund. We're part of a national financial cooperative called the Seed Commons that allows us to give non-extractive financing to our co-ops. This is just a flavor of some of them. Our Harvest, the first one, food and farm. And energy, well, it says installation, but now they're also into solar installation. This is actually a land trust that does affordable housing in a way that people build financial equity and community in the process. We have a childcare co-op, a cleaning co-op, a compost co-op, a home care. This is grocery delivery. We have a host of new ones that we haven't yet put beautiful pictures on, so coming soon. And then our last strategy is being part of these important national networks like One Worker, One Vote. Because again, we really, really feel strongly that we all do better when we all do better, and we need to figure out ways to share. Like, I want to bring Allied up to life in Cincinnati, Ray, as soon as possible. I don't know how that would go, but it's like but we all definitely, when we can share these sorts of things and support one another. We in Ohio also have a statewide cooperative network that now has 10 cooperative developers in it, which we're excited by. We also are involved to some extent in policy work on a variety of issues that matter to us, only constrained by time. Finally, for any of you that are interested, we're having a union co-op symposium. And Ray, we haven't yet reached out to you, but really desperately hope you talk. So that'll be on November 12th and 13th. And we may be reaching out to a number of you that we would like to speak, actually. We're a little behind the 8 ball, but the first day is all virtual. So wonderful for participation, although I don't know about timing. It's from 1 to 4:30 East, no, 1 to 5:30 Eastern that day. So maybe that's a realistic time. I'm not sure. Maybe it's not 3 in the morning, like it is for Ray. But anyway, and the next day is in-person deep dive. So that is our story. And now we get to hear from Ellen. So let me stop.
Ellen, over to you.
Hey, thank you so much. I'm going to share my screen as well. And good morning. Well, good day to everybody.
Could you just turn off the mic a little bit, up the mic a little bit, so we can hear you better?
Yes.
Can you hear me better now?
Much better. Much better.
Okay. Hopefully you won't hear my kids too much in the background. So just wanted to say thank you guys for having me here today. I have deep roots in the labor movement, spent 11 years working as an organizer and an organizing director, and just have deeply felt that as a labor movement that we're really trying to improve our workers and our families' lives as much as we can. And so we need to have every tool in the toolbox to make that happen. And so I feel like worker co-ops are such an important piece of that, in addition to all the traditional things that we do. So one of the things I'm going to share with you guys today is about one of our new strategies that we're doing to really try to move the needle and be more impactful and bring these worker co-ops brought these unionized worker co-ops to life. And let me just give you a little background before I go into our Business Legacy Fund. So in Ohio and probably across the entire world, right, we're facing lots of key economic challenges. We have all these baby boomers, all these folks who are, getting older that are owning these businesses that really don't have a plan. So that is one key crisis that we have here in Ohio in terms of what's going to happen with their business when they retire. We also know that so many workers are facing precarious employment and that there is just this huge division in terms of wealth inequality. So this is something that's obviously not unique to Ohio, but is a big reason why we're doing this work. I can see a report that we just published there on the right, Building Legacies. So just to kind of give context to this baby boomer succession crisis, so more than half of all the baby boomer businesses in Ohio, and across the country plan to retire, right, in the next decade. But 80% of these lack a succession plan of who's going to take over next. And in Ohio, the baby boomers own over half of our businesses. So about 94,000 firms employing 2.6 million people. Across the country, this looks like more than 2 million businesses employing 25 million people owned by baby boomers. So we feel like this is a real important thing, and this is going to be a huge point of kind of a transition of wealth within our community, and it could really be something that would exacerbate inequality or something that could really help to spread out some of that wealth. So we have started a program that we just kicked off last year, right in the midst of COVID and everything that was going on, but called the Business Legacy Fund. And this fund and program, it's a multi-million-dollar fund, but that's really about, working with these business owners, helping them realize that there's another way, there's a third way, in terms of you can't find that, if that son or daughter doesn't want to take over, if you can't find that outside buyer, that maybe you should be looking inward, that maybe you've got the folks already right there who really care about this business, right? Really care about, the longevity of it, who've helped to build that business and work with you hand in hand to make it successful, and that they may really be the perfect folks to really, preserve your legacy and keep this business, doing the great things it's doing in your community. So as Kristen mentioned, we are a part of a national financial cooperative that has enabled this to come to life. And so we have been doing lots of great stuff with it. So just to kind of give you guys a picture of the types of businesses that we're working with. So, we are again, working with these retiring owners who really care about their legacy, or folks who maybe are an owner, but really don't want to just keep all of that responsibility on their own shoulders, that want to broaden responsibility, because we know how hard it is, right, to be a business owner and to do everything yourself. So those are the two types of owners that we're looking for, or businesses. And then this is not a rescue fund, because we really are trying to look for something that's a smart investment for the workers. If they're going to invest their time and their energy and their money into a business, it's got to be strong, a strong company that's going to be continuing into the future. It's also about, a place that is treating their workers well, right? They've got low turnover, that they do care about their workers. And we're currently focusing on kind of small to medium-sized businesses. When these businesses apply to us and are part of our program, we take them through kind of a step-by-step of how to actually transition it to their workers. This is a flavor of what that looks like, but it's really starting off with, are we compatible? Is the price range in a realistic place? We're not looking at charity here, we're looking at fair market values. But sometimes, owners, then this is their baby when they've been doing this, for a long time, they sometimes have an inflated view of what that value is actually in the market. To them, obviously it's worth so much, but sometimes that's not actually what it's worth on the market. But once we kind of figure that out, make sure that this is about, that they care about their legacy and that they care about, kind of preserving that business. Then we start to go through step by step of like, what will it take from a worker side? Who is in that business? What kind of leadership is there? What will it take operationally? How do we transition all that knowledge from that owner to those workers? And what does that financial plan need to be? What does the deal need to look like? And so then we just, once we're all on the same page around that, we start crafting that plan. We put that, that package together in terms of capitalization. And then once that deal has been done, then we start, sometimes we say the real work or the really hard work, right? But of really making that co-op come to life, helping them to create that worker ownership culture. So excitingly, for the businesses that apply to our program, we provide them up to $20,000 in free technical assistance of walking them through step by step of all of those pieces. And then they're first in line for funds to capitalize through our Business Legacy Fund. And then we help them, like I said, from step by step to build that culture going forward. Excitingly, from just our first year, we had 12 businesses apply. Of those 12, 6 were a part of the program, 6 got in, and we helped 110 workers take concrete steps towards worker ownership, one of which is transitioning this month, October, with 12 workers in a childcare business. They will be owning their childcare business together. Excitingly, we've got a new thing we've added on this year, proactive searching. So we've wanted to be really targeted. We now have an actual acquisition fund manager where we are going out and we are going to say exactly the type of businesses we want to buy. We want to have impact. We really want to, and we want to be able to go in the types of industries that we really care about. So one is going to be manufacturing. We're really excited to go out. We're already looking at 2 deals. One with 60 workers and a foundry and a precision tooling manufacturer. So we're looking at like bigger deals. You guys can see here, at least $1 million in revenue, at least $250,000 in EBITDA, or kind of free cash flow, and at least 10 workers. And that's so that we can really start to make some differences, right? Bigger differences in people's lives with worker ownership. Here are some of our professional managers that are going to be helping us do this. And I think that's all I've got here, but any questions if you guys know any businesses in the greater Cincinnati area, we are accepting applications for our program this year until November 15th. But we're really excited to really dig in. This has been a very successful program so far, and we hope to have lots to share with you guys in the years to come. And we're hoping that more people start these types of funds around the country, and across the world. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. This is what happens when you combine a mighty union organizer with an MBA. So over to you, Kevin. Kevin, you're on mute.
Thank you so much, everybody. I can't believe I have to follow this group, and I'll do my best to play my part here, but we really are a small union co-op that really has just gotten our feet under us over the past couple of years. I have a unique perspective because I've been working on this union co-op for 20 years now, in one form or another, and I've seen it attempted without an infrastructure that includes good organizations like Co-ops UK or One Worker, One Vote or Co-op Cincy. And I've seen it with the support of that kind of community. So I'm just going to take you through kind of where we came from, what we do, and where we're going. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that. But our story starts, believe it or not, with the sale of Ben & Jerry's Corporation. And for those of you who don't know Ben & Jerry's, there's a really rich history of an association with Mondragon. And I grew up, believing that Ben & Jerry had a wage solidarity with their employees and had protections for their employees, which it turned out they in fact did not. And once they were sold to Unilever, Ben in particular had a real passion for proving that capitalism was not evil. And in 2001, he actually started a union cooperative called SweatX. And as you might imagine, an ethical business person from the US who starts a new company after having such success with a different company got a lot of press around it. And And I got involved because I saw the damage that globalization was doing to my industry, the apparel industry. And I was able to get in touch and get involved. And I don't want to spend too much time on the prehistory, but there's a really great documentary, if you're interested, called No Sweat, that tracks the conception, delivery, and eventual closure of that union co-op. And if you are interested, I'm certainly happy to come back and fill in the details that aren't covered in the movie about why it failed. But you can imagine lots of reasons a business fails that don't have anything to do with it being a union or a cooperative. And that's the truth of SweatX. What I did learn in the short period of time that SweatX was in operation was that there was a market for people who cared about the same things that union co-ops care about. The products and the types of organizations. And I somewhat blindly agreed with some of the people from Burlington after the closure of SweatX to continue to do business, not as a co-op, but as a C Corp. And I don't know how that translates in England, but think of the worst of the worst corporate structures you can have. And it worked. You know, it certainly worked really well in that we were able to service the same clientele, and we were able to grow the business 30% year over year. And eventually a tipping point led to high profitability. And although there was the intent of making that company worker owned, you know, the 7 deadly sins of capitalism creeped in, and greed, and all the tough parts of ownership didn't allow for me to stay with that organization. And I was very blessed that at the same time, Co-op Cincy came to inception. One Worker, One Vote came into being, and there was suddenly a national network of organization that and cooperation that I could sink my teeth into. And I kind of left the blank slide for all of you guys, my fellow panelists, because without you, I wouldn't be here today. I would have given up. And I think that's probably an important lesson for you guys in the UK, that it's awesome that you're bringing everyone together so that you have people to lean on, people to learn from. And I certainly have, and the people who continued on with Works, including some of the people you'll see in a moment, just kind of stepped back and said, well, if we're going to do a true union co-op, what market share do we want to go after? And we got super lucky in recognizing a trend back in 2014 towards a print-on-demand model, which simply means that people can sell stuff online without having inventory. And inventory is a very tough thing to carry in business. So people love it, and organizations love it, and our clients love it, and the market loves it. And the industry's really been exacerbated with COVID and the closure of physical retail operations here in the US. So we've had a pretty wide path to walk down as a business. And we started, as most companies do, with one printing press. And our original master pressman, Dave, was able to help us figure out how to make one shirt at a time. And that's the difference between, and in the printing world, most equipment is set up to make lots of stuff, and you look for big orders. We kind of went the opposite direction and looked for the smallest orders possible. And we're now grown into a 7,000 square foot facility and capable of shipping thousands of individual orders and packages a day. And sometimes we get really famous people who send us designs, and it's really wonderful for us to feel a connection to that broader pop culture community. And our business niche happens to be within like-minded organizations who share our politics. And it's even better when our US senators recognize us and choose to work with us because of what we are. And when nationally recognized progressives in the US choose to work with us because of who we are and what we do, it really is amazing to be a part of not just a political community, but a cooperative community. And we're a super small group of people today who are full-time, but the secret to our success is also another kind of throwback to the Mondragon model, which is the fact that a vast majority of us come from technical school backgrounds, and we also use the technical high school model in the US and partner with our Worcester Technical High School and bring in students to learn the modern techniques that we're doing. And it gives us a real connection to our community locally and helps us teach moving forward. What we've been able to do is really pull together an amazing client base of people who understand what union co-ops represent in the US and choose to work with us because of that. So moving forward, what we're working on is figuring out a way to get all of these people with really large audiences and followings to help spread the message of how valuable a union cooperative is, and hope to give back to the community that's helped raise us up. So thank you everybody again on the panel, and I'll turn it back over.
Well, thank you so much, Kevin. It's hard to follow you, even though we have weekly meetings, it's an honor to it's a total honor to be the end of the line for our panel. So let me just try to conclude with the following thoughts. First, Scylla, I think you attended the Co-op Cincy 2017 Union Co-ops Symposium, and you were a big hit with us. And we certainly welcome you back virtually or physically in 2021. Second, two of our movement union co-ops recently briefed the White House Task Force on Worker Empowerment through the good offices of our policy partner, the American Sustainable Business Council, or ASBC, which also collaborates with Social Economy Europe, or SEE, thanks to the intervention of our Mondragon allies. One of those testifying was Kevin on our panel today, and the other was Flecka Vera of Sustainergy and Co-op Cincy. Another point to consider is that the U.S. House of Representatives, which is our lower house, and their Small Business Committee just passed the Co-op Lending Pilot Program, which has the opportunity to be a game changer if it advances, because it represents the first time the U.S. federal government has recognized that the collective guarantee is just as viable as the individual guarantee. Specifically, the $500 million program grants worker and union co-ops and consumer co-ops access to SBA, Small Business Association, a small business agency administration loan products without the requirement of a personal or entity guarantee. This is if you connect a collective guarantee with a collective bargaining agreement, that you have a brand new business model. Next, the on-ramp of ESG, what we refer to as globally as environment, social governance, and SDGs, the UN's, there's 17 of them so far, Sustainable Development Goals, social impact investing now juxtaposes human, social, climate, and financial capital for the very first time. And the global rush to develop sustaining metrics, or what they call KPIs, key performance indicators, gives us a huge opportunity to reset the table in the union co-op direction. This is hopeful, despite the fact that we have the predictable virtue signaling and greenwashing. But what we are already seeing is that Bank of America reports that 4 out of every $10 invested globally is going to ESG companies, missions, and projects. In the US, dozens of investors and business groups led by ASBC, the US Impact Investing Alliance, and B-Lab have been pushing the Biden administration for new rules and incentives to reform American capitalism for the long term. And now a group of House and Senate members are joining the call. They're requesting the creation of a White House initiative on inclusive economic growth to coordinate policy across the federal government to shape the economy that works for all. They want the Biden-Harris administration to take executive action to, quote, reform capitalism in such a way that short-term profits and shareholder primacy no longer take center stage. Stakeholder capitalism and community investing are being embraced across industries. And the House of Representatives has gone on record saying, we believe the White House can tap into a growing movement and ensure we transform these ideas into lasting, impactful policy. Up to 95% of millennials are interested in investing sustainably, according to Morgan Stanley. Bloomberg reports that pressure is increasing on managers of ESG labeled investment funds to show they're being truthful with customers about what they're selling. The US Security and Exchange Commission Chairman Gary Gensler testified discussed before the US Senate Banking, Housing, and Urban Affairs Committee recently on establishing clear rules of the road for corporate ESG disclosure. Mr. Chairman Gensler said in July that he's asking SEC staff to consider a human capital disclosure requirement for companies, a human capital disclosure requirement. This is heading directly towards 2 of the 10 Mondragon principles that differentiate the stakeholder-centric economy from the shareholder primacy economy. And that is sovereignty of labor, centered around the people doing the work, where worker owners receive competitive and just salaries and dividends based on the profitability of the enterprise. And the second one is instrumental and subordinate nature of capital. Only profitable enterprises provide the workplace freedom to align principles with practice. Generally, a corporation sells shares of ownership and management to raise capital and then hires labor. The Mondragon cooperatives do not sell shares to raise capital. Instead, the workers own their cooperative enterprises, choose their management, and rent sustaining capital. Within the Mondragon ecosystem, capital is labor's instrument, not its master. So to conclude our part of this panel and this program by Union Co-ops UK and the UK Cooperative College, progress is often incremental, but it is present. Hope is undimmed, even in a world beset by the trifecta pandemic of COVID, climate, and predatory capitalism. Our goal is what Sarah Horowitz calls the new mutualism and what Heather McGee refers to as the solidarity dividend, where the whole is so much greater, more caring, more just, and more fulfilling than the sum of any parts. Thank you, and back to Scylla.
Hi, everybody. It's actually Anita here. I'm going to be hosting the Q&A. We've realized that the audience is seeing a slightly strange version of the presentation. So the boffins are working away on it in the background to see if we can improve things for everybody. In the meantime, though, we'll start the Q&A. If you have questions for the panel, rather than putting them in chat, it would be great if you could actually put them in the Q&A button, and I'll curate them all and read them out to everybody. We've had a couple of questions from Janet Newsham to get us going, and Ray, the first question is for you, but I think actually it also applies to all the other panelists as well. So perhaps, Ray, what have been the biggest challenges for you?
Sure. Well, I guess my perspective is as a union staff. So a big challenge for me, and I think our local was dealing with something we really wanted to do, to help develop co-ops for our members that was sort of in a really deep and what felt like risky area just because it's legally untested. We're, like lots of unions, sort of paranoid about being sued and about risk, and kind of defending the castle and protecting what we have, and being good stewards of our members' money. And so this was, yes, there's cooperative home care associates, and there's some great examples of union co-ops that have existed for a long time in the US. And at the same time, it's totally new to us. And unfortunately, in the US has not hit some huge scale, especially this, this nexus of unions and co-ops. So the fact that it's so newish and kind of untested is difficult. And I guess that's partly because it requires money to start, and a resource investment of people's time and money. And so to the extent that it's an organizing tactic, that's resources and time and money that's not spent on a different organizing tactic. So sort of internally getting over that hurdle was difficult, and had something to do with how much time it took to finally make something happen after kind of studying and white papering it to death for a few years.
Brilliant, thank you, Ray. Does any other panelist want to come in on that about the the challenges that you face?
Could I come in, Anita?
Yeah.
I mean, as a UK trade unionist in the same sector, I think it's great to be inspired by the work that Ray's union, the SEIU, UHW are doing in the States. And obviously they're a sister union of Unison, the large public sector union in the UK, which is my union. And I think the idea of linking cooperative development, worker power, democracy and voice to union organizing is the hook to get unions this side of the Atlantic involved, because for the union movement, well, I can't speak for globally, but here has been in retreat for quite some time. But the better unions and the glimmers of hope have been around union renewal programs and organizing. And I think this is just another great opportunity for us to show that we can organize, and especially show that we can organize not just in the workplace, but out of the workplace and connect with communities as well. And I think, we're obviously in a different, political economy than the States. We have a large public sector that we're very fond of, but we know there's a whole hinterland, especially in the care sector, which is in huge economic crisis in this country. And I think that's where we need to go as public sector unions is our ultimate goal is insourcing into a nationalized health and social care service. But we're not necessarily going to do that overnight. And I think building cooperative democracy is both the way to go in that sort of wasteland of low union density that we have, and shoddy care. So I think we can improve care and improve union membership growth at exactly the same time. But the way in which we organize that work is a lesson back into the public sector as well, because these places are not bastions of worker voice and democracy, far from it. So we have state ownership of these institutions, but worker voice is still, a poor relation within that. And I think, what I get from you fabulous colleagues over in the US is how inspiring it is to see that workers can actually be in charge of their own destiny. and that's our goal over here. So we really want to sort of catch up with where you guys are. So thanks.
Great, thanks, Mick. Okay, so the next question we have is for Kevin. So Kevin, do you work with the suppliers of the products you use to ensure their working conditions and pay? So it's a question about the wider union co-op ecosystem. Not sure if
Sorry
Kevin
about that, I
can
keep
hear us.
muting.
Okay.
Yes, so 20 years with the union co-op model, 25 years in the industry, and in our industry, Made in USA was a big standard in the United States for almost a century, and I've only ever worked with that niche, so I've never worked with imported goods. We have standards that we have to work under, being a signatory with the United Steelworkers, that a big reason people use us is to print a union bug. I don't know if that translates into the UK, but so the minimum standard of garment we can print on is a USA made garment. And not saying that that's a bastion, but the companies we use are pretty large and pretty public. So they're required by US labor laws. We do try to start with the AFL-CIO's union label standards, which are, if you can buy union made, buy union made, which we do, and a large portion of our blank goods are union made in the US. And then they would fall back to, if you can't buy union made in the US, buy USA made. And then just because of early international solidarity, Canadian union made would be next in that line, but we'd also put fairly traded goods in the same category. And my personal goal is, to get back to the standard of union cooperatively made goods. And it's just a bit of a challenge right now, and why I'm so thankful to have organizations who are working at the national level who pull us up and help us connect with other like-minded people who are trying to do similar things. So we have a pretty strong supply chain, and we hoping to strengthen that over time.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kevin. Our next question is from Julian Manley, and it's for all the panelists. So how do you balance local roots work and wider national perspectives? I don't know, Michael, will we start with you?
Sure, we could start with me, but I would love it if Kristen jumped in full force, and Ellen on this one. So obviously, Co-op Cincy for our movement is absolutely imperative. I mean, we always refer to them as our nationwide prototyping center, because so many good things have come from them, and then they have so many imitators. And Shakespeare, I think he was British, said that imitation is the sincerest form of flattery, and they are sincerely imitated all around the country now. I think that we need this kind of innovation, because if we don't constantly push against the envelope, then we end up falling into ruts. And this movement can't afford any ruts, because we're constantly trying to prove something new. On the policy side, it's really good to find policy innovators. And that's sometimes very hard, because everybody has their favorite petri dish where they feel most comfortable operating, and that's where their funding comes from. And what you have to do is find organizations with a nationwide reach that are unafraid of breaking eggs and striking out for the truth that has to be articulated. And we were very fortunate in finding that with the American Sustainable Business Council, 250,000 triple bottom line businesses. They're now merging with Social Venture Circle, which has 700 social impact investors, including the original Ben of Ben and Jerry's that Kevin cited. And we hope to combine money and policy with what Ellen and Kristen, the Co-op Cincy team, are putting together locally, the Business Legacy Fund, and create, nationwide networks upon nationwide networks, so that the Seed Commons isn't the only nationwide go-to network, but there's others, and there's social impact investors that are learning how to do this and realizing, because they have to report it. The institutions that invest and the companies that receive those investments are soon going to have a fiduciary duty to report on ESG. That's also going to drive, how we source the money, just like Kevin drives how he sources the products that go into the t-shirts and the other things that he sells. So this can be what we call a virtuous cycle, and we're in the middle of creating it in real time. So Kristen, please improve upon that.
Yeah, well, I just was going to say, I feel like it's a really insightful question, because it's something that I think we're constantly reflecting on. And I think periodically we go in one direction a little bit far for a moment and then come back, because I think it is about balancing both. I mean, we want to see in Cincinnati, so just so you know, like the Basque region of Spain has 2.1 million people, and greater Cincinnati has 2.5 million people. So it seems clear that within 50 years, we should have 75,000 worker owners in our area. So that's like a pretty big goal. And so so as we think of also, like Kevin said, it's like, we now have all these full-time staff, but we're constrained, right? When I talked about policy, we believe policy is so important. And yet I feel like the level of time we put towards that, sometimes it's a lot, but most of the time it's not, it's like this real push and pull. We believe deeply in our core, and you can kind of see this, like, it's kind of like Ray saying in part why it's tough to, it's a real thing when you're working to steward union resources and you're going to something that's somewhat time consuming and not fully proven. That's like a real, that's an ethical thing, And so the more that things get proven all across the US, across the world, that just helps all of us so much. I mean, so we deeply, deeply feel, as we spend, I should say, even though it's a challenging balancing act, every week we spend a lot of time in national calls. So because all of this, so like this workers to owners network that Ellen is kind of talking about around business legacy, the Seed Commons that financial cooperative is a really critical piece that we are involved with. We have these national, we work with people around the country who want to bring this to life and try to get thoughtful about, well, how can we do some of the national work in a way that really kind of more directly impacts our local work at the same time. So we try to create anyway, I don't know. I don't know if I'm even being clear. We view it as super important and all, it's like all these things are high priorities. So I think just from a time point, we go back and forth, but we sure feel the power when we are able to focus on our national and statewide. It's really exciting what started to happen in Ohio, for example. And the thing is, so when we started this statewide network, there were only 3 of us that were involved. And now within a year and a half, there's 10. Some of them are totally new groups that are able to, just because of the rest of us, get their pieces together and move things forward. And then, us, 10 of us across the whole state going to our state for policy, how much more powerful are we when we represent the entire state, and more. So it's just, I guess it's critically important and it's tough to balance at times.
Yeah, that's super. Great, Kristen. And I think Ray has to weigh in on this also, because Ray is leading one of the most innovative labor transformation initiatives in the highly innovative state of California, which is a country unto itself, called the Cooperative Economy Act. So Ray, if you could just maybe give us an update on that, that'd be great.
Sure. Yeah, I feel the same tension, resource and time constraint, and wanting to focus on our members and sort of like look down a little bit, and then wanting to do policy and bigger work. Ballot initiatives and legislation are a reasonably big piece of our strategic research department that I help run. So we do get to do a lot of outward facing stuff, but it is a hard balance. And what Michael is alluding to is our first foray into doing that kind of work at a statewide level on anything near this topic, which is we developed legislation called the Cooperative Economy Act it's basically kind of set of built-in advantages for worker-owned labor pools in any industry to try to take back and separate labor from gig economy platforms and prevent misclassification, and also and require minimum labor standards for what those cooperative labor contractors look like, and keep them high road with built-in democratic worker control and solid definitions of what that all means, so that to kind of keep out bad actors and keep in good actors. So it's unusual to come from a labor union, and we're kind of socializing it with other unions over the course. It's a 2-year bill, so that's part of this is like it's slow. It's all these things like feel sort of slow, but at the same time, and any movement feels important. So we're pushing ahead with it, and it has been great to have the support and collaboration of ASBC and Teamsters and UFCW and other big unions are interested into it too. So I do feel hopeful about it. And then, I guess I'm thinking more about this question, the policy and local versus bigger kind of efforts and expenditures of time and attention and resources. And we've lent some thought and time to more local kind of worker-owned issues, I guess, and I hope that we do more of that. So like procurement and issues that have come just from like the co-op community here in California. We sit on a coalition that's statewide called Worker-Owned Recovery California. WORK is the acronym. And I'm the only person in it who's from organized labor, which should change, I hope. But it's other than that, it's mostly co-op developers and policy folks. And the goal, my personal goal there, but I think also our union's kind of bigger goal is to try to get more into each other's policy worlds. And so like that coalition, for example, this last legislative cycle made a trailer budget play to try to get some funding for technical assistance to convert viable but turning over businesses into worker-owned entities. And there's no particular union piece of that, but it's critically important for economic recovery and all kinds of things. And so I feel like more things like that too feel important to be a part of as a coalition, exactly like what Kristen said before about, if we're there and we have all of our coalition partners in this group all saying, pay attention to this, saying to state policy and lawmakers, like, pay attention to this. We need money for this. We need, resources, or we need this change in order to be able to build this particular type of economic landscape. The bigger we get, the harder it is to ignore us. So, some
That
thoughts from
actually
council.
really nicely leads into the next question. Thank you, Ray. Because Michael Bentley has asked about getting the wider public interested. So his question is that with the technology available now, how can we get the messages out to more people? The capitalist media have too much control over what we're taught or told. And should money be invested in socialist cooperative TV stations and newspapers? So it's a question really about visibility and invisibility in the wider world. Not sure who'd like to take that.
I know Kevin has some thoughts.
Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I question whether or not to fight the system of American media or work from within it. And I always find it interesting that we use the term marketing when we talk about the business community, but we use the term communications when we talk about what we do. And I think a little marketing never hurt anybody. What I think is difficult is when you have lots of little entities all trying to do their own marketing. So it probably makes sense to pool our resources as a cooperative community and do some marketing within the system. The only reason I ever did any of this in my life was really just to prove that there was a different way of doing things, that you didn't have to do the traditional capitalist run in life, go to school, get a job and work for somebody else. And I think that simple message really affects a lot of people. So if we could pool resources, work within the system and market a simple message, I think that would benefit us all.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Kevin. And Julian Manley has actually made a suggestion on this discussion, saying, could we organize a transatlantic education program to support these ideas and bring in Mondragon too? So new technology like today's Zoom call could be used in solidarity across the pond. So
yeah, let me, anything that Julian suggests is a suggestion that we want to take to heart. So let me just flat out say that. Second, I think that Julian and our colleagues from Mondragon, like Ivan Zugasti and others, are very well situated to team with us. And I think that the upcoming Co-op Cincy Biennial Union Co-op Symposium is a great platform to organize something like that in real time. So, Kristen and Ellen, here's another thought to add to the already very busy agenda. So the answer is yes. And, let's get it started. There are a lot of artists and journalists, union co-ops beginning to spring up. We, as I mentioned in earlier talks, we're in conversation with Co-op Cincy and One Worker, One Vote with a 40-member artist union co-op in British Columbia that would love to connect with Union Co-ops UK. And I think when we were talking about it with Kevin, Kevin thought, well, this is great. We always need artists. This is a great pool to reach out to. So we have these natural synergies, and they're more than we know. People in the film and documentary industry, people going on media, people producing critical mass media that sometimes makes it to national level publications like the New York Times or the Guardian or others. El País in Spain, and I think that with our transatlantic relationships, plus, Social Economy Europe and ASBC alone have 3.2 million members that they can bring together for causes that require, a big transatlantic voice. We should be part of this more and more, and the roots are already installed to make it happen. We just need to organize, and maybe we can start in November at the Co-op Cincy Biennial Symposium.
Brilliant, thank you, Michael. We're now going to go to a question that goes from the general back down to the very specific, and I think maybe Ellen or Kristen might want to answer this. So it's a question from Rebecca Lurie, and she asks, please share some specific roles and tasks that unions play in forming and funding co-ops. And that actually also ties in with a question from Simon Taylor, who was wondering about the source of funding for the Business Legacy Fund. So what kinds of support did you get for the wider community? Great, thank you.
Well, I'll start with the first question first. We work with unions in many different ways. So, sometimes it's very active. Sometimes it's like where, like, for example, I was paid by my local union for, I think, at least 3 years. Sorry, hold on one second. I'm getting feedback. Hold on 1 second. Just gonna close the door.
Ellen was paid by 3 years by her union as we are organizing our first co-op, which is a food and farm co-op called Our Harvest, which is organized by UFCW, which was the union she was working with, United Food and Commercial Workers. So that was a very direct contribution. Let's see what she wanted to say next.
Okay. Sorry about that. My husband's listening downstairs, and so the little one escaped up here. So, and I would say we've also worked strategically with unions, alongside them on campaigns where, they are working to really impact an industry. For example, in childcare, we have universal kind of pre-K funding that was passed. And so they were working to improve the conditions of childcare centers within the city, but then also at the same time, we were proactively working to create a unionized childcare center, a unionized cooperative childcare center at the same time, or other types of unionized childcare, type businesses that were co-op owned, worker owned. So I think, there's there's a whole range of ways that we've worked with unions in terms of forming these co-ops. We definitely, obviously doing our collective bargaining agreements, getting them directly connected to the health and welfare funds, having access to healthcare at an affordable rate. Quality healthcare is really hard to do if you're not connected to a larger organization. So having that has been very, very, very impactful for our co-ops to be able to provide good benefits to their workers. There's a whole range of ways that unions, can be engaged from the strategy from the very beginning to, supporting the union or the co-op as it grows. And then on the second question, in terms of what types of resources have we been able to get into our Business Legacy Fund? So we have local philanthropic groups that have given money and put money into it. But we also, excitingly, because we're a part of this national financial co-op, we're able to go, like we've talked about doing things collectively, we're able to do joint fundraising collectively. So they've raised over $50 million, around, through impact investors and foundations nationally, and then are able to deploy that all across the country. There's over 30 different local loan funds that are each able to deploy that money. And excitingly, we can have control completely over the funds raised locally. They help us with all the back end and all the reporting requirements and provide the whole kind of due diligence and kind of loan infrastructure system. But then we can also tap into national dollars as well and be able to fund a lot of things that we never would be able to if we didn't have access to those resources.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much, Ellen. And we have time for one more question. So this is one for each of the panelists, and perhaps we'll start with Ray and finish with Michael. And the question is, so what advice would you offer to UK activists? Or perhaps what's the one basic step you'd recommend that we should take to get going?
Well, I kind of like this gathering right now. I've found it so useful to be connected to other people who are thinking about the same thing from different angles, and I feel like it's advanced the amount of time in a really helpful way. It's sped up how long it takes to sort of solve pieces of these puzzles, and all sorts, of course, co-op developers and union activists, and then also, a lot of specialists, people who are CPAs or lawyers who only do co-op work, and different types of policy thinkers, and of course, groups of workers themselves who think about how all of this and know very readily what would improve their working conditions. So I feel like reaching out and creating places for us to, like us meaning people trying to do this sort of work, can connect and share resources has, to me, been like incredibly valuable. So I guess that would be my suggestion.
Great, thanks. Kristen, over to you.
I find the question challenging because I was just thinking that you all are doing so many neat things, right? That inspire us, that we pay attention to. So, I mean, you're doing all kinds of convenings like Ray's talking about that seem really powerful and can catalyze all kinds of possibilities. There's so many neat efforts underway that we frequently talk about Preston. We frequently look at all these things. So I don't know. I mean, and so then I think like when we're talking to any new, so then I'm just sort of like, well, okay, I'll just pretend that nothing's going on, and that like a new community has come to us and said, what can we do? What are our first steps? And we always do say, well, the first steps are to start to learn and to study about it, and to kind of like pay it, like kind of see what's been going on in England, what's been going on in other places, what are some things that inspire and get us together, and what are these principles and what do they really mean to us, and to have these study groups for a while. And then when a strong enough group emerges, then you figure out the next steps that make sense for that group.
It's never underestimate a study group. Thank you, Kristen. Ellen, next.
Yeah, I think I'll maybe continue on that same vein, because I agree. I feel like it's hard to know when I don't know all of the amazing things you guys are working on. But I mean, I think definitely getting started, right? Like, picking, based on the people that you have involved, picking projects that speak to people's passion, that speak to the types of change that they want to see, but being very specific, right? Like picking those key projects that you want to bring to life, and then finding the right core group of people who want to actually work in that, right? Like not just the folks who want to help think about it and bring it to life, but the people who want to do that work. Because we know that to have a successful co-op, like the people are just the most important piece, right? They're the ones who just make everything happen. And if you don't have that base, then you can make the best plan in the world, but that plan won't come to fruition. So I think just really getting those right people involved, but then I think also just getting started, right? Like it's it's not going to be perfect. We're all building it as we go, and so just starting to take that step, learning when we make mistakes, but just keeping on moving and going forward, but just taking steps to bring that to fruition as soon as you can.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much. Kevin, over to you.
I just build on what Ellen said. Success builds on success. And you guys have such a concentration of expertise in all your industries that it's identifying one entrepreneur and helping them realize their potential success, and then having a successful union co-op, or whatever you want to call it. I see some chat on different names. At the end of the day, it is a business, and it needs great people to work in it. So finding a single group and lending them some additional resources so that you have a model to show other people would be really helpful.
Brilliant. Thank you, Kevin. Scylla has her hand up. So Scylla is a co-host. So I think at this stage, rather than going straight to Michael, I'll hand over to Scylla, and we can possibly begin wrapping up. So Scylla, over to you. Can I just say though, thank you so much for this discussion. As Andy Birchall said in the chat, it's been really, really inspiring. So thank you all.
Thanks very much indeed, Anita. Did Michael give his last word?
No, you had your hand up, so I decided I would go straight over to you.
Much better you than me, so.
Oh, no chance. No, I mean, we've got sort of 6 minutes left-ish, but I would like to pass over to Michael. But why I had my hand up as well was there was a lot of stuff going in the side chat And I just, I think for for those panelists on the call, it's been a really inspiring and really inspirational sort of discussion. But you all appreciate as well that the UK context is slightly different. And, I think some of the questions there would really be rewarded by having a further dialogue, because I think, for example, how do you describe this model when in the UK, for example, you have quite different histories and traditions, which probably the same in the US, I guess. But here they are. They come together at certain times, co-ops and unions, and other times they separate out. So how do we go about doing that? You've given us some great ideas and really got us thinking. But I think the idea of actually continuing this relationship, building on this network, would be really fantastic educationally as well, and in terms of our mutual solidarity. But I'll pass over to Michael for the last minute, and then I think I'll wrap up. So and just thanks everyone again for everything you've done. Michael.
Thank you so much, Scilla. So, post-industrial is what we do. Marginalized, disintermediated, disenfranchised. That's who we are, and that's what we do. Our organic approach from the bottom up, creating these virtuous cycles that end up in what you see at Co-op Cincy, what you see at Preston, what you see at Mondragon, what you see now throughout many different ecosystems in the United States and other places around the world, is really what we're doing. They're calling it in public the stakeholder-centric economy. I'm sure they'll come up with a better name, but in the meantime, we are going to be the nuts and bolts, the rubber hits the road, the proofs of principles, and we're incorporating all the values that people have talked about today. You can't have enough communication among people doing this kind of work, but what we've learned through the Co-op Cincy sort of, lesson is that the work, as Ellen said, has to be very practical. It has to be very focused. Sweat equity is the greatest equity of them all, as Kevin knows, because he's redefined it and fought for it all his professional life. So I think if we combine sweat equity with the brilliant ideas that I personally have learned from Preston and what's happening in your part of the UK, I think that we can make bigger things. We can exchange templates. We can compare different structures. We can inspire impact investors who have universal global platforms to do unto us what they did unto somebody else. For example, as Ray and I have discussed, what DoorDash did in Australia is so much better than what DoorDash did in the US. And why didn't DoorDash do it in the US? Because they thought they could get away with it. So I think, there's no substitute for power and wealth to workers. And we need to be very clear. Nothing that does not contribute that is worth our time. Everything that does is worth all our time. And so I just want to thank everybody for the privilege of knowing and collaborating with you and being your friend. I feel that very deeply in this world, especially these days. So I just can't thank you enough. Over to you, Scilla and Anita.
Thank you very much, and I can only say you all know on this call and wider how much that's reciprocated. So thank you very much. And what's been brilliant about what everybody's said, and also what's come out in the chat down the side, is that the notion of the union co-op being a resource for hope. And we've unapologetically nicked that from as Mick and Steph have on the side chat, and I do from Raymond Williams. It is an extraordinary resource of hope, and the idea of at this terrible time in our human lives to actually think about a way of positively, constructively making a better world, an equitable world, is fantastic. So thank you so much. I'd like, on behalf of everyone on Union Co-op, and it's really great to see Alex has dashed back onto the call. Thanks so much, Alex, for driving so much of this in terms of the website and the communications, and Anita for handling everything today, and Andy, Mick, and Simon, for us all meeting together, actually, because it's you who's really inspired us, and along with our colleagues and comrades on the call. And it's a shame we can't see their faces in many ways, because they've stuck with it. They're the ones who go back into communities and make things happen and in their unions and in their co-ops, and really come up with great creative ideas. So what we've also put in the chat is links to our forthcoming early next year, or mid next year now, face-to-face conference on union co-ops, which we really hope as many people as possible can come to, plus a link to our website. And thank you so much, and let's hope this is the first of a number of great times together where we can work towards developing this model in the way that it needs to be developed. But thank you so much, everyone, and we're finishing spot on time. So have a great rest of day. Go back to bed, some of you, but thanks so much indeed.
Thank you everyone for attending today, and thank you very much for watching this recording online. Do please try and join us for some of our future events. You can see on the screen here the links that will take you either to register for the rest of our series of seminars and be able to watch them live, or indeed to come to our face-to-face conference in Sheffield at Workley Hall, and that's Sheffield, UK, of course, and that's May the 20th to the 21st, 2022. Thank you all.